Barney runs one of Australia's most successful independent gaming businesses called Powerhoof, which he started 2 years ago. The guys make a game called Crawl. They've sold about 50,000 copies, and the game is not finished yet. Very slack. So guys, please make Barney feel welcome.
Is my mic on? Is this working? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. This is just for us.
Yep.
Good morning. This feels early for marketing guys. Surely this is very early for gaming developer guys.
Yeah. I usually sleep till about 1, but...
Well, thank you for staying up or getting up early, whichever one it was.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with the game, Crawl. What is this?
So it's what's called a local multiplayer game, which is very, very niche these days, I guess, because you actually need physical humans in the room with you to play with, which when I was young, that was the real thing, but these days that's kind of crazy. So it's, for anybody who's into video games, it's a pretty straightforward premise. A hero runs around in a dungeon and kills a whole lot of monsters, but we've sort of switched it up so all the monsters and all of the hazards and traps are controlled by the other people on the couch next to you instead of by the computer.
Okay, cool. So kind of like for those of us that would have played Mario Kart or like GoldenEye or something as a kid, and you're all sitting around controlling different characters.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so from a, I guess, game development perspective, is creating a game where 4 people are all playing at the same time harder or easier than creating a game where you just got one player just doing their thing?
Yeah, so our format is kind of weird, but it's a lot less work to make because all of the thousands of lines of code doing artificial intelligence to get the enemies and get the traps and things to be reacting seemingly intelligently to what the player's doing. We don't have to write that code because your friends are providing all that intelligence, so it's kind of the best kind of AI. It's not artificial intelligence anymore, it's actual intelligence.
Depends on your friends.
Yeah, well, but what they bring, so it's less work for us. We're getting better intelligence, and we're also getting a lot more fun intelligence because the computer doesn't know how to tease you to make you laugh. The computer doesn't know that thing you did before really, really pissed you off, and so to do it again, and then do it again, and do it again. So yeah, we get a lot more for less, but in terms of design, it's a lot more challenging. I guess everyone here will have seen action movies and things where a hero goes through a room and kills 1 million enemies and then sort of leaps to the next room. And that's a pretty typical thing in video games. And it's really easy to make it really rewarding for the hero who's doing that and killing everybody. But with our format, we have to make it so that for every one of those enemies who just gets dispatched in 1 second, it's also just as challenging and rewarding for them. And so, yeah, it's the whole thing is kind of a bit more like we're building a set of toys or a chess set where the things we actually build are just these really simple pieces, and then the players use them to entertain each other. So they think that we've made this amazing thing that's entertaining them, but really they're doing all the work.
Awesome. So let's get one of the, I guess, elephants in the room off the table straight away. Let's talk about these bleeding edge photorealistic graphics that you guys have clearly invested. Because, you know, when I met Barney, I was told, this guy is one of the most successful indie gaming companies in Australia. And when I went and looked, this is not what I was expecting.
Yeah. And definitely a lot of people, I've showed them the trailer and they're like, oh, is this not full resolution? What's going on with the... And yeah, so I mean, there's been an arms race in the video games industry for a long time now of like graphics just getting more and more realistic and real-time rendering, getting super technical and calculating subsurface scattering under character skin and stuff. And that's the way things have been going. And so we knew, just 2 guys in Melbourne, if we get in that competition, we're not going to win that competition. So we found a competition that we're pretty confident we could win, which was, we just love this nostalgia for these early 90s PC games and arcade games and stuff. and we kind of felt like the people who were trying to capitalize on that nostalgia were doing it the wrong way, and that sort of they were looking very specifically at what those old games looked like and mimicking that, and looking at the limitations of the tech and mimicking that. But if you do that, you go back and look at those games and they look terrible. But I remember them looking really amazing. And so the plan was to make a game that looked and played like those games do through my imagination and excitement as a kid when I was playing them.
I think I've got a little thing here. So this is one of our characters, right?
Yeah.
So it looks like this, but like they kind of move.
Yeah. And so this sort of thing, back in the day, it just would have been one frame with the spear back, one frame with it forward, and I'd be watching, I'd be controlling that, and in my head, he'd be doing all of this stuff, and I'd be like, oh, this is amazing. But so when it was time to go back and, make it happen, we're like, yeah, we don't want to really follow the nostalgia. We just want to follow like our rose-tinted, imagined idea of what the nostalgia was like.
Yeah, so this, I guess, would have been like if any of us have been to Luna Park over the age of 20, and it's like, this is not how I remembered this at all. This is terrible. Yeah.
So like with that, it's more like if you, instead of going back to Luna Park, if you just described to someone what it was like from your memory, and were like, oh yeah, the roller coasters went up to the sky and the big head was so realistic and the mouth was like chomping you in when you walked in through the door, and then you actually built that instead of building, a copy of the real thing. So that's sort of what we're doing.
Amazing. Okay, so it sounds like you would have been into games as a kid?
Yep. I played lots of video games and was making board games and making really crap video games when I was little, and that was pretty much all I was interested in. So
this, I guess, would it be an inevitable conclusion that at some point you were going to be a professional game maker guy?
Not really. So I thought that I'd have to do the kind of mainstream application of my interests, which was just be a graphic designer or web designer, and I was planning on doing that. But I was like, on the side, I'll just learn how to make video games. I'll learn how to do 3D animation and 2D animation and modeling and all of this stuff. And so I was expecting to get a real job, but I sort of went online on all these internet forums. And I mean, even when I was young, those forums were just amazing. Like I'd go on and say, I need to learn how to do this type of rendering or this type of animation. And instantly I'd be talking with animators from Pixar saying like, do it like this. I'll critique your thing. I'll tell you how to change it. Or, guys who had been the sort of 3D art lead in a movie that I just watched saying, this is how you get your lighting right. This is how you do this subsurface scattering and all this stuff. So I ended up kind of getting hooked into that and just living online with these kind of geniuses who could tell me how to do all this stuff, and kind of losing interest in the bored sort of teachers at school who were reciting things from textbooks and stuff. And so I dropped out of year 12, but I had a really good folio of animation and stuff that I'd been doing from the internet, and I ended up getting a job in the industry.
The gaming industry? At the age of?
21 probably, yep.
Okay, so dropped out of high school. Parents would have loved that, I'm sure. I'm going to be a professional game guy. You are. But then 21, you've been a game guy your whole life. You get a gig in the real industry, getting paid real money to make games.
Yep.
So this is like life goal done. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah. So this was long before I ever imagined the concept of having my own company or anything. I just thought, I'll work for a games company and it'll be the best thing in the world. And all of my dreams satisfied, all that stuff. But that lasted maybe a week until I realized like the harsh realities of creative industries, and just particularly the games industry in Australia. I guess I had naively thought like, the better you are at doing this, the more you'll get paid, and the more creative you are, you'll just get to make the most creative games in the world, and it'll be awesome. But it wasn't quite like that for games in Australia. I think there's probably parallels with some other industries, but in games, when I started in the 2000s, Australia was just a cheap sweatshop for America making these movie license tie-in games. So the situation was they'd have a movie, they'd have the Avengers or something, and they'd spend a whole lot of money on marketing. And so, there'd be trailers and posters and stuff everywhere. And so they'd just know in the midst of that marketing, if there's a box on shelves that has the same title as the movie that they've been marketing, that has the same picture on the front, X number of kids are definitely going to buy it, no matter what. And so because the sales were coming from a completely different product and existing marketing, and not from reputation of that game or reviews of that game or anything to do with the game could be a piece of crap. And it always was, because those sales were guaranteed. They were like, well, we don't want to cut our margins by spending a lot of money making this game, so let's just give the project to whoever can say they can do it the cheapest and the fastest, so we can get the box on shelves. And so that's sort of what Australia was. We've got programmers, and we've got a lot of good programmers, and our dollar was very weak compared to America, and so we sort of had the skills, but we were very cheap, and so we just ended up just desperately trying to underbid each other, all these companies, to say, we can make it faster, we can make it cheaper, and then ending up with just these impossible projects that couldn't be anything other than just trash.
Okay, so I'm sure everybody wants, can we have an example of a train wreck, please?
Yeah, so I think my crowning glory was this game Jumper. There was this movie Jumper with the kid from Billy Elliot or whatever, and he teleported around, and the movie itself ended up being a bit of a flop, but we made the game for that, which was, we made it in 4 months, which was a project that should have been maybe 2.5 years or something. And 1 month of that was just certification, just the game had to be finished, and then we were just sending it back to Sony to get them to sort of approve it. And that, we won the prestigious Metacritic Dud of the Year award, which we were pretty proud of. But we did beat a free game that came with the Toyota Yaris, this Yaris racing game. So yeah, we were pretty proud of ourselves that year, obviously.
Amazing. So clearly not the beacon of creativity you were hoping for. So what happened?
So 2 things happened. The first one was the GFC, which
Yay, go GFC.
everyone was really upset about, and at the time we were really unhappy about, and so our dollar went up compared to America, and so we weren't such a cheap sweatshop, and so they just, over the course of a couple of years, they just stopped giving us those contracts, and all those companies, the slice that our companies were actually getting out of this whole process was so thin that 4 months without a contract and they just go down. So yeah, all of those companies collapsed over the course of about 2 years.
So that's the first thing, and what else happened?
So that was the really bad thing, and the good thing was online stores. It was around the time that the App Store was becoming a huge thing, and a very similar thing was happening with on PC and Xbox and PlayStation, and it seemed like a really small change for people who are playing games. It's like, oh yeah, the internet is now a thing, and now sort of instead of going into a store and buying a thing, I can just download it, and it sort of, on the surface, seems like a pretty small change. But for us making the games, it was just night and day. So where previously we were a tiny sliver, and then there was this huge distribution kind of process of all these people printing discs, putting them in boxes, shipping them around the world, buying shelf space in shops and all these things, just to get it out there, and then potentially find out that the game was a flop. It kind of meant that everyone was massively risk averse because they didn't want to gamble their millions. And so we were really conservative about what we designed, and the people actually making the games got the tiniest little sliver. And so as soon as people are downloading it, it's like, oh, well, we don't need all these guys, all these hundreds of middlemen organizing the freight and organizing the boxes and all that stuff. So they all just disappeared, and it's like, oh, I know how to make a game. I'll just do that, and I just put it on this store, and yeah, I'm connecting straight with the people.
So you basically got direct line access into people's living rooms, and
Exactly.
all of you guys got access to that at the same time. So what kind of happened?
So at first there was this a massive flood of pretty samey, pretty terrible games to what was happening before, because everyone was used to being super conservative. Everyone was like, oh, you've got to copy the previous thing that was successful, or else, you're risking. But then when we realized, like, oh, now we can afford to fail. Now we can afford to like try a weird thing that might be really exciting and have people not buy it, and you don't go broke. And so suddenly you could try something creative. And because people were just doing the same old thing and copying the previous things, being creative and weird and experimental was suddenly the only way to get noticed. And so it went from being just an absolute liability to don't rock the boat or else you risk our millions to, do something creative so you get noticed.
And I guess you've sort of put that on the fuel of all of these repressed creatives who had the creative life beaten out of them for the decade prior.
Exactly, making all these duds of the year, and then it was like all of those companies died, and then we all had no jobs, and then it's like, oh, we don't need companies and publishers to get on these stores. So there was just this massive like regrowth of all these super creative little companies doing really experimental, strange things and selling games online.
Amazing. So that's, I assume, where you guys came in?
Yeah. So me and the guy that I work with, Dave, were working at one of these old games companies. We were working on a passion project of this tween cheerleading game, licensed with the Bring It On movies.
Instant classic.
Yeah. We were all, super pumped about it. And then the GFC happened, and so that project got pulled. We lost our jobs, and so me and Dave were like, all right, let's start a company. And so we made our own company, Power Hoof.
Yeah. So what is a Power Hoof? I know what a Power Hoof is clearly, but for everybody else here.
So the name came from when there was myself and Dave working at this company and a bunch of other guys. And we were really not enjoying people being able to see our screens at work when we were sharing cat videos and stuff. So we sort of designed this layout where if we put all our desks in this big sort of hoof shape, we'd all be backing onto each other. No one would be able to see our screens unless they walked into the center of us, and we could just gossip and show stuff. And so we convinced our boss to let us do this by he was really into catchphrases and things. So we're like, oh, this is this like Power Hoof arrangement. It's really good for agile development, and we can just turn around and straight into Scrum, and it's super efficient. So we sort of built that Power Hoof at work, and our boss was like, oh yeah, you guys are doing a great job. And then when the company went down, we were like, oh well, I guess it's just us now. It's just the Power Hoof. So it was a natural kind of name.
Amazing. Okay, so you guys have been around for how long as Power Hoof?
2 years now.
Cool, and the game is called?
The game is called Crawl.
And you guys are sold?
So we started selling about a year ago, and in that year we've sold 50,000 copies.
Right, and the game retails for?
$10 US.
US. Let's go shitty Australian dollar.
Yeah, exactly. So every tiny bit the dollar drops, my salary goes up. So I'm kind of enjoying it at the moment.
Now, let me just think about this for a sec. As a guy who may or may not have a whole lot of unfinished projects at the moment, you've sold 50,000 of these, but it's not finished.
Yep.
Okay. So how do you do that?
So that's another weird thing that we get, and a lot of software is getting the same kind of thing from digital distribution. Is now we just have constant access to the game. We can just change it and update it whenever we want. And so instead of just selling, hey, this is our finished game, I hope you like it, we're kind of selling the process of us making it as well. And so we're using this program called Early Access where people buy the game in an early form, and then we're just updating it weekly or monthly depending on what we do, and kind of the game that's sitting on their desktop that they're shortcutting into is just kind of evolving over time. And so they're kind of coming along for the ride with this, which is cool, but what's even cooler is that they're talking to us in our forums and hassling us on Twitter. And so instead of it just being like, I authored this thing and I gave it to these people, it's we're building it together. And I'll put a thing out and I'll be like, hey guys, what do you think of this? Is this, are you enjoying this? And they'll be like, oh yeah, I want more like that, or change this, or I hate it, or whatever. And so it's like this weird sort of two-way dialogue on this kind of slowly evolving game. And
And will you finish it? Because if I just sold 50,000 copies of something that I haven't finished, I can't imagine my motivation to finish it would be sky high.
Well, we've been about 3 months from completion for about a year and a half now. So, yeah, I mean, we're not in any hurry, really. But, yeah, we'll finish it. We're 3 months away.
Yeah. So is 50,000 a lot? Like, is that a lot of things to sell?
I mean, for me and Dave, personally, yep, 50,000 is a lot, you know. But in the context of the store and everything, it's nothing. It's next to nothing. And so, I mean, I think even though our game is, games are niche, and then within games, these kind of weird independent games are a niche within that niche, and then within that, these local multiplayer games are a super tiny little niche. So, that's like cut the audience down to this fraction of a percent of people, but online, like that fraction of a percent is still in the hundreds of millions and still like could pay our salaries 100 times over. So I feel like the player pool for our thing is effectively inexhaustible. Like we could never market it well enough to get everybody to know about it. So yeah, 50,000 is a lot for us, but it's nothing compared to what we could be selling.
Crazy. So, you talk about how big the size of this store is and how many, millions of people are on there?
On the store, yeah. So I think the store is called Steam.
Yeah.
And there's maybe up to 9 million concurrent users at any one time going through the store. So it kind of means that if they feature us on the front page of the store for a couple of weeks, we never have to work again, And it's even if the game wasn't that good, just from the brute force of that number of people seeing it and that fraction of a percent going, oh yeah, I'm interested in that and click on that, and that fraction of a percent who have clicked going, yeah, okay, I'll buy it. So yeah, the store's huge.
So good segue. 2 more questions for you. So one is, out of all these millions and millions of people coming and however many tens or hundreds of thousands of games that are on there, how do you get found? How do people know that you did this thing?
Yeah. So all our marketing is online.
So no billboards, no TV, no radio.
And so online's great because if someone sees something about the game, they're just one click away from buying it. The same story's online. And so all we need to do is let people know that it exists, and then that fraction of a percent who are into it will click on it. And the main thing that we've learned about kind of spreading information online is what people want to spread is cats falling off things and just stupid jokes and videos. And so I do my marketing mostly just by making stupid jokes. And if people think they're funny, they'll share it on their Twitter and Facebook, and they'll spread it around, and I'll make more money.
That's a good formula. So I did some research. I found this guy.
Yep.
You know who this guy is, right?
Yeah.
We'll talk about this guy quickly.
This is Gabe Newell, who runs the online store that we all go through. So to us making this stuff, he's kind of a bit of a godlike figure.
He looks godly.
Yeah. Yeah. If he chooses to put us on the front page, like that's it. That's my career forever. If he doesn't let you on the store at all, then it's like I'll probably never make any money as a game developer. So I sort of had this idea of a joke a while ago that, I mean, he's so powerful, but he's also just like chubby and hilarious, and I like that concept. And so I wanted to put him in the game as a monster, looking how he looks, looking just like a super cheesy video game nerd, which is exactly what he is, but also being like the most powerful monster in the game.
Should we take a little look at this? Here we go. Hang on. Here it is.
Yeah, and so this was just a stupid joke that I made, and just the kind of thing that I would usually make just to like entertain a couple of my friends. It was like one weekend doing that, and I don't know, there's a whole lot of little jokes in there. There's like him transforming, like he used to sort of have the short hair and stuff, but then he sort of grew this long hair and this beard.
I just want to watch it one more time. It's so funny. Were you scared about angering him? He's like Steve Jobs and the Google guys together in your industry in terms of power. Were you scared about pissing him off?
So we made this. It got spread around. people liked it, our salary went up, and then I realized like, oh, it's being spread around. He's probably going to see it. So I was like, oh, here's another good opportunity for marketing. So I wrote him a letter, which he received to ask for permission, because I was like, at that time, if you just typed into Gabe Newell on the internet, like you just got 100 links to this animation. So I was like, okay, he's probably going to notice it. So I sent him an email just saying like, oh, is it okay if you use your likeness? You might see this thing, and offering him that in return he could use my likeness in any of his future video games, and I sent some photos of myself. And so once again, it was just like a stupid joke, and I kind of knew that like if he says yes to that joke, then that's awesome marketing, and that's the story that people want to spread. And if he says no to that, then like, oh, Gabe Newell destroyed this little thing. So once again, it was just like, make some silly jokes that people will want to spread, and they spread it around, and we get paid for it.
So did he reply to you?
Yes. They got back, and it just said, it was just from one of his underlings. So it was just like, Gabe Newell approves of this. Yeah.
And will he be using your likeness in any of his upcoming projects?
I'm waiting.
Awesome. So what's next for you guys?
So, I mean, right now I've got to rush off to PAX, which is this video game conference, and show our game to a whole lot of nerds dressed in milk cartons and stuff, which should be pretty fun. Yeah. But for us as a studio, we're about to finish this, and we've got a second game that we're working on, which is a lot more mainstream, or maybe a lot less mainstream.
Do you want to take a look?
This is it's called Regular Human Basketball, where you get to see these regular humans play very humanish basketball in the regular way. And so we basically got like a chunk of Mario or something where you sort of run around and jump on platforms, but we chuck that inside this giant robot, and so you're kind of running around, flipping these switches, trying to control this ridiculous robot as it's flipping upside down and you're falling everywhere, and it's basically... So I mean, once again, it's just something that if we competed with the big companies, we'd lose. So we just made a competition that no one else is in, and then we just give ourselves the first place medal, because we're like, yeah.
I feel like I've just seen inside your brain, and I'm so confused. I reckon maybe you could just take maybe one quick question from the audience before. I know they're phones, they're not questions. Anyone got a question? One here?
We're not working in the free-to-play space. So we worked on mobile for a long time, doing free-to-play stuff, and it's evil. And you know, they're just using a lot of like gambling psychology things to sort of trick people in, and you know, they'll say they'll make it so, oh, you need to buy points to sort of continue. They'll get you psychologically attached just enough. Then they'll start asking to charge to sort of continue, and they'll make it so that you can only buy the points to continue in packs of like 10,000, but it costs 300 points to buy a thing. And so you get the 10,000, you buy 3 things, and it's like, oh, I've got 100 left. And so it's this psychological, oh, I'd be wasting my money if I didn't buy more to try and use that. And so, yeah, the free-to-play stuff is very, very sneaky and insidious, even though these days it's best practices, but we can make these things, sell them for an upfront charge, which is not at all best practices, but the internet is so big that there's enough people that'll just buy it anyway.
So I guess like if there was one big takeaway from today, it's just like screw what everybody else thinks.
Yeah.
Make the thing that you like.
Yeah.
And then make jokes to tell people.
And then make terrible jokes on the internet. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Hey, all the best for PAX this morning. I hear it's a pretty big deal, so good luck with that.
Cheers.
And thank you so much for coming out this morning.